ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Bismillah. Today we will be discussing sort of the well-known dispute which takes place year after year regarding Salatul Taraweeh and its length, whether it's 8 rakat or whether it's 20 rakat. Inshallah Aziz, today we will address sort of the concerns in this respect from the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Now when we're looking at these things, the first thing we must consider is actually the practice of Sayyidina Rasul Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam himself. Now in the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, we understand from the Sahih hadith in Bukhari that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam left his home and he came into the masjid and he began a salah which we understand to be Salatul Taraweeh. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam began this salah and some people joined him in congregation and they followed him in this salah. Now, we learn from the hadith on the second night, the Prophet ﷺ, when he performed this salah in the same manner, because people had been talking, more of a congregation had developed and more people had come to join the Prophet ﷺ on the second night. Again, all during sort of the nights of Ramadan. Now, on the third night, the Prophet ﷺ, when he arrived, again the congregation had grew because more people had been talking about this prayer of the Prophet ﷺ. When it came to the fourth night, according to narration, the congregation had grown. Many people had arrived to join the Prophet ﷺ in this extra sort of ibadat during the month of Ramadan. But then, according to narration, we learned that the Prophet ﷺ, they didn't attend for this salah on that night. And the next time they came out from their home, ﷺ, was in the morning, in the early hours, and the Prophet ﷺ had explained. And then we understand from the ulama the reason why the Prophet ﷺ didn't come again in this manner, because they feared that it would become an obligation and it would become something which was burdensome on the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. And therefore Hazur ﷺ didn't come out on this night. Now, on the same note, we understand, according to the laws of fiqh and according to the fuqaha and the great jurists, that this salah is actually a salah of sunnah mu'akkada. It's a heavily emphasized sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and it's most virtuous to do in the nights of the month of Ramadan. However, it's not a fard, it's not an obligation per se, but it is very heavily emphasized. To join in a congregation and read it in the masjids, this is mustahab, is very recommended and desirable sort of action. Now we know that in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the situation remained as so as I informed you in that hadith, all the way until the time of Sayyidina Faruq Azam, Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala. When he was Khalifatul Mu'mineen, in his time he had seen in the masjid that people were praying individual salahs. There was a small congregation this side, there was a small group here, etc, etc. So what Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala did to unite everybody and put them under the same banner, he appointed a sahabi known as Hazrat Ubay bin Ka'b radiallahu ta'ala. He appointed him as the imam, and he put all the people together under one banner and one congregation, and he consolidated the salah of Taraweeh for every single night in congregation in the month of Ramadan. And he commented on this, and in the hadith of Bukhari, it says that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala actually said, he says, Ni'matul bidatu hadihi. He said, what an excellent bid'ah, what an excellent innovation, a good practice. And from this we also learn that there are even, there's also positive bid'ahs, there's also good bid'ahs and good innovations, and the ulama karam, they accept this. Now, after Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala instated this salah in the manner that he did, we know that this has continued for 12 centuries from that time all the way until the present date. Now, this includes 20 rakat salah being read even in Haramain, in Makkah Sharif and Medina Sharif, and Masjid al-Nabawi. Even you will find that even till today, 20 rakat salah is being prayed for Salatul Taraweeh, because this was the practice which was consolidated by Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala in the form of congregational salah. Now, one thing which must be noted here is that when Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala consolidated 20 rakat salat Taraweeh, the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, who were very familiar with what the Prophet ﷺ would read in their home during the month of Ramadan, they were aware how many rakats the Prophet ﷺ would read. they never objected to this practice of Sayyidina Farooq-e-Azam radiallahu ta'ala. For that hadith that I explained to you, that the people who actually prayed with the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for those couple of nights, those first 3 nights, they know and seen what the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam had prayed. Now, if a Sahabi or Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam seen Sayyidina Umar consolidating a practice which was different to that what the Prophet ﷺ had done in his time, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they would have surely objected to it, or they surely would have made mention with respect to this, that this was different to the practice of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But we know it was accepted throughout, and unanimously accepted throughout the Sahaba Kareem and the wives of the Prophet ﷺ radiyallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'een. Now, in the same way, we know in 12 centuries, all the ulama have approved of this practice and they've endorsed this practice. Whether that is, the Aima Arba, that's Imam Azam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah alayhi, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, whether it's Hazrat Abdullah bin Mubarak, Hazrat Sufyan al-Thawri radiyallahu ta'ala, all these great scholars have endorsed this practice of 20 rakat Salatul Taraweeh, and never in 1200 years will you see any variation of this or any other opinion anyway. In fact, the famous Imam of Hadith, Imam Tirmidhi rahimahullah ta'ala, he actually is famous and known for recording all the fiqh disputes, all the legal disputes that ever took place in history. Now, Imam Tirmidhi, in his time, and he's made no mention about this debate, whether Salatul Taraweeh is 8 rakat or 20 rakat. He's made absolutely no mention of it. And the reason for that is because it never ever existed. In that time, there was never ever a debate, there was never ever any confusion in this respect. It's always been 20 rakat Salatul Taraweeh. Furthermore, the fact that 12 centuries of this ummah have always prayed 20 rakat salah, we understand from that, we understand as a matter of legal principle, that on this issue there is jumhur, there is consensus, absolute consensus amongst the scholars and the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and even from the time of the Sahaba Kareem radiyallahu ta'ala, that it is consensus, jumhur and ijma', that it is actually 20 rakat Salatul Taraweeh, and any deviations against this would be very, very wrong. Now, the only difference I can tell you, the party that say we follow 8 rakat Salatul Taraweeh, let me explain to you where this actually comes from. There's a hadith in Bukhari Sharif, say that Aisha Sadiqa radiallahu ta'ala, somebody came, a sa'il came, a questioner, and he asked Sayyidah Aisha Sadiqa radiallahu ta'ala anha, he says, O mother of the believers, tell me about the Qiyamul Layl, the night prayer of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is what she was asked. Tell me about the night prayer of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So Sayyidah Aisha Sadiqa radiallahu ta'ala anha, she says that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he would pray 11 rakat. The Prophet ﷺ would pray 11 rakat during the night, and she said, fi Ramadan wa fi ghayrihi. So he would pray 11 rakat in the month of Ramadan and otherwise, so in and out of the month of Ramadan. Now the question here is, which Salatul Taraweeh takes place outside the month of Ramadan? None, exactly. The only Salatul Taraweeh is for the purposes of the actual month of Ramadan itself. What Sayyidah Aisha was telling us, which we understand from this, and we learn from this, Sayyidah Aisha, what she was actually saying is that the Prophet, she was referring to the Tahajjud Salah. And even in Imam Bukhari's Sahih book, if you look at this hadith, you will find this under the chapter of Tahajjud. The questioner asks about the night prayer of the Prophet ﷺ. And she answers with respect to the night prayer. She said that he used to pray 11 rakat, which includes the 8 rakat of Salatul Tahajjud, and it refers to the 3 rakat of witr. Now we know that in this ummah, based on the practice of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, to reserve the 3 rakat of Isha Salah to the final part of the night, the third part of the night, is most virtuous and rewarding for those people who are able to do so. Now, who are in a regular practice and they're able to do so. Now, so the Prophet ﷺ would reserve the witr salah to the end of the night, the third part of the night, when they would pray the tahajjud salah. Now, we know Taraweeh salah is that salah which happens between Isha and between the witr. right? It happens between Isha Salah and the Witr. So we read the Witr after the Salatul Taraweeh. And this is why there's confusion in this respect. Some people may have thought that this 11 rakat was being referred to 8 rakat Salatul Taraweeh and 3 rakat of Witr. Now this is completely wrong, and we know this because Sayyidah Aisha clearly and categorically says, fi Ramadan wa fi ghayrihi. So in and out of the month of Ramadan, the Prophet ﷺ would pray these 11 rakat, which was referring clearly to the Tahajjud Salah, the 8 rakat of Tahajjud Salah and the 3 witr which take place after that, which the Prophet ﷺ used to read in the third part and the last part of the night. Another point that I want to mention here, the questioner, what he actually asks and what he says. He asks about the Qiyamul Layl, the night prayer of the Prophet ﷺ. He didn't ask about Salatul Taraweeh. He didn't ask a specific night prayer, about the specific night prayer, which is also a Qiyam of Layl. Taraweeh is also a night prayer, but only reserved to the month of Ramadan al-Kareem. So based on this hadith and this, you can see where the confusion comes from. But the fact that Sayyidah Aisha makes it very clear that she's actually referring to the Tahajjud Salah and not the Salah of Salatul Taraweeh. The final point I want to add, which I deem to be the icing on the cake, inshallah ta'ala ul aziz, we know that there's 540 raku of the Quran Kareem. Now, where in the Quran, on the side of the page where you see the ayn, this refers to a raku. Now, in Salatul Taraweeh, we know there's 20 rakats. So for each rakat, there's a raku that we must go into. Okay, and that happens according to the time of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala. When they would arrive at a ruku, they would go into ruku. That's where the ayn is marked in the Quran Kareem. So there's 540 rukus of the Quran Kareem, and for every rakat of Salatul Taraweeh, they would also go into ruku in accordance with that marked in the Quran Kareem. Now we know by the 27th night of Ramadan, it is the practice of this ummah to complete the recitation of the entire Quran Kareem by the 27th night. Now, if mathematically, if you work this out, you have 540 raku in the Quran. We have 20 rakat times by 27 nights. That will conclude the Quran, because that is actually 540 raku, and therefore it perfectly aligns with the system of Salatul Taraweeh in the form of 20 rakat. Now, this is the established sunnah, therefore, of the Prophet ﷺ. This is the understanding. Furthermore, there's a hadith, Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala, and he brings this, and Ibn Abi Shayba rahimahullah ta'ala, he puts this in his Musannif, and he says that the Prophet ﷺ actually prayed 20 rakat Salatul Taraweeh in the month of Ramadan. And therefore, because this month of Ramadan is the month where the Quran was revealed, Inna anzalnahu fi Laylatul Qadr, on a particular night in the month of Ramadan of Laylatul Qadr. Therefore, the Muslim Ummah, they listen to the beautiful words of the entire recitation of the Quran Kareem. Had there been 8 rakat, we could not complete the recitation of the Quran Kareem during this blessed month. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability and the facility to understand the ijma' of this ummah, to follow the true hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and make the most of these beloved days and nights of the month of Ramadan. Please remember us in your du'as. Wa ma